Hey friend, welcome back to Rent Hacks. Today we're going to be talking about fair housing. Now, what is fair housing to you? And how does it affect how you look for apartment homes in 2024? Well, fair housing was originally put forth in 1966, and it was used to address discrimination that was going on towards people of color. Imagine being a Vietnam veteran. You gave the ultimate sacrifice to this country, and your family back home can't rent or buy a property because of their color or their national origin. Hispanic Americans and African Americans were severely discriminated against when looking for housing in the 60s. Hence, the Fair Housing Act. Now, even though it was set forth in 1966, it really wasn't approved until 1968. Now, again, it was all too easy for people of color to be discriminated against, and oftentimes those who challenged discrimination were faced with resistance, hostility, and even violence. Now, the reason why we're talking about this today is because Martin Luther King Jr. was one of the biggest supporters of this bill. He had been at the forefront of the housing marches in Chicago in the 60s. Now, on April 4th, 1968, the day the Senate was to go and vote on this bill, Martin Luther King Jr. gets assassinated in Memphis, Tennessee. He was there helping sanitation workers strike. And so much happened in the days after his assassination that President Lyndon B. Johnson added extra pressure to Congress to approve the Fair Housing Act. Sure enough, 7 days later, on April 10th, 1968, the Fair Housing Act was approved. Now, the Fair Housing Act protected three classes: race, religion, and national origin. But unfortunately, that's not enough. With such a diverse melting pot of people that we have in this country, more protections needed to be added. That's why in 1974, they included sex. And then again in 1988, they added disabilities and familial status. And these were added because these groups were also being discriminated against. Now, these 5 protections can be found nationwide in all 50 states. Some states have added additional protections for other classes of renters. Virginia, for example, adds elderliness, source of funds, sexual orientation, and gender identity, and veteran status. So let's go through them one by one. Race. It's the race that you choose on that card when you're filling out an application. It's also the color of your skin. This prevents discrimination on those 2 factors. Religion can feel a little straightforward, but essentially you cannot discriminate based off of a person's beliefs or not beliefs. Sex, in the 5 nationwide protected classes, now also includes gender identity and sexual orientation, and it previously did not. Housing providers cannot deny housing based off of someone's gender as a qualifying basis. Next, we move to disabilities. This refers to an individual's mental or physical disability as a qualifying factor for housing. Familial status is for people with children, whether adopted or fostered, single parents, grandparents, expecting mothers, or anyone with legal custody of a minor who would otherwise qualify for housing. Those are the 5 nationwide protected classes. Now let's dive into the Virginia protected classes. Virginia adds source of funds. This is mostly to protect people who receive government subsidies like EBT, Section 8, or house choosing vouchers from being denied housing based off of where they get their income. Sexual orientation was in Virginia's protected classes before it was a part of the 5 major ones. This means providers cannot deny someone based on the provider's perception of that individual's homosexuality, heterosexuality, bisexuality, or otherwise. Virginia also had gender identity, which is huge now. This addresses protecting an individual's appearance or gender-related characteristics, with or without regarding to that individual's designated sex at birth. Virginia also has veteran status. Virginia is a highly metropolitan area that has a lot of veterans moving to it. This protects a person who served in the military, naval, or air service who was discharged as anything other than dishonorable. I wonder if this includes Space Force now too. Probably. Those are the additional protected classes you can find in Virginia. Now, as you're looking for an apartment, or searching to add a roommate, renting out your condo, or if you're looking for somewhere to rent, keep in mind that it is illegal to violate any of these protected classes. When I was going over my fair housing training a few years ago, was a situation where children were being denied access to fitness centers. Now, when I say children, it means anyone under the age of 18. Leasing offices used to have these big signs either before you entered the gym or inside the gym that said no persons allowed under the age of 18. That was actually removed because it was violating the familial status protection, meaning that if a 15 or 16-year-old wanted to go and weight train, they were unable to do so. Hence, their rights were being violated. In many locations now, these signs have been removed. And if they haven't been, you should probably tell that person to take it down when you're on tour. Another one that stands out is making print or publishing certain advertisements or flyers that could be perceived as discrimination by indicating a preference or limitation to a certain group of people. Anything like falsely denying available housing to a group of people based off of any of these conditions is illegal. Another one that personally stands out to me is assigning a person a certain building or neighborhood. This one's a huge violation, and it primarily affects those with disabilities. As leasing consultants, we're trained to try and help find someone the best home. So if you're not prepared, oftentimes you could steer someone. Say someone requires a wheelchair, goes into an apartment home, and the leasing professional says something like, "Oh, you might not like this one because it has carpet." That is not your decision to make. It is that person's decision. And you have just violated their rights. Saying something else like, "Oh, I have a different one that has lower countertops." Or even people with familial status. Your children might be happier on the first floor. Your children may be able to run around and not disrupt other neighbors because you'll be on the first floor. Again, that's not your decision to make. Now, if a renter says, "I'd like an apartment on the first floor so my kids can enjoy their home," that's a different story. Ultimately, as you're out here in 2024 and thereafter, if you feel like you've been discriminated against, please reach out to the United States Department of Housing and Urban Development, also known as. They investigate all complaints and concerns regarding fair housing. Their special task force in the Office of Fair Housing and Equal Opportunity. The link to this page can be found below. So today, take a moment to thank Martin Luther King Jr. for the steps he took to make housing more available to people of color. Who knows where we'd be at without him? As a person of color, an immigrant, someone with a large family, with a religion, is protected and is able to find housing anywhere that I like. So if you haven't done so already, please subscribe. Check out the links to our Instagram and our TikTok, where we put out a bunch of different content to help you stay positive and stay informed. Thank you. Catch you on the next one.